Hello everyone and welcome to the Oxytocin Effect. Today it's just me here with you, Joe. Caitlyn is not here today, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive into the doula world. What is a doula? Go over some frequently asked questions and kind of talk about the role of a doula, how we stay in scope, all of the things that people are curious about the life of the birth doula. So to start us off, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I got into doula work and what that journey has been like for me. I started out as an infant nanny. So I went to college. I have a degree in psychology. I really thought that I was going to go into like marriage and family therapy or adolescent therapy. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I thought that I wanted to do something in that space. And I had already been nannying for a while. I also mostly nannied between 0 and 2. So I was specifically like an infant nanny. And through that, I saw a lot of postpartum experiences and I heard birth stories. And I always felt very fascinated with it. And I remember kind of thinking that I wanted a job that really meant something to me. I am not someone who is like a work to live person. I don't want a job that I don't care about just so that I can live my life outside of it. I feel like work is most of my day. It's going to take up a ton of my life. I want to really love my job, really enjoy my job, and I want it to feel meaningful. And being a doula is something that to me is extremely, extremely meaningful. I also knew I wanted some kind of advocacy, some kind of larger community or political meaning to my work, and doula work really fulfills that for me. So I started out really thinking that I was going to do it basically pro bono. So I was going to maybe take a few births a year, do it for free, essentially as like a hobby or like a side service. And that plan quickly fell apart because the more births I attended, the more I fell in love with this work. Quickly, I kind of turned my mind to going, okay, maybe I will be doing this full time. And I stopped nannying because I wanted to go full time. And there was kind of a natural conclusion with my nanny job that I had at the time. I fell into doing this work. I take 3 births a month. And it really has been the most amazing, meaningful thing I have ever done in my life. But it's also kind of an interesting niche thing that I didn't really know existed, or I guess I didn't really understand what it is to be a doula. I was definitely one of those people who thought that doulas were essentially midwives or that they only attended home births and things like that. So I want to go over some frequently asked questions that people have about doulas because it's really common to not quite understand this role or what it is or have misconceptions about it. And I want to dispel some of those for us today. So the first thing that I get asked all the time, is a doula the same thing as a midwife, or like what is the difference there? And the difference between them is huge. I would say that there's much more difference between a doula and a midwife than a midwife and an OBGYN. And some people would disagree with me on that. But the reason that I say that is because what a doula is a support person. So we are emotional, sometimes informational, advocacy support through pregnancy, birth, postpartum. Now, some people are just postpartum doulas. Some people are just birth doulas. There's also death doulas. There's also abortion doulas. There's full spectrum doulas, which is technically what I am, but I mostly do births. But in the birth doula world, we are support. So we are there for our clients. We know them deeply, but we are not part of the medical team. Midwives, on the other hand, are part of the medical team. In fact, they're essentially like your primary care provider for pregnancy. So if you are seeing a team of midwives, they may have a team of OBs that they also work closely with. But that doesn't mean that the OBs are like in charge of the midwives, which is a common misconception. Midwives are medical care providers. So they will be doing things like checking a cervix. They will be doing things like giving you IV antibiotics, sending you for your glucose test, talking to you about the results of your ultrasound. Those are midwife things, and doulas don't do any of that. So when I am attending births, there is always someone else there. That's not true for all doulas, but for me, and I would say most doulas, we are only really attending births where there is a medical team present. present. So there's an OBGYN, there's nurses, there's midwives, whatever. We are a completely separate role from that medical team. And while we might interact with them, we might kind of help you interact with them. It doesn't mean that we are the same or that we replace one another. It's like the OBGYN route, the midwife route, and then a doula is a supplement to one of those things. And we help with a lot of different things. What most people know is that we help with kind of like pain management techniques, especially for people who are going unmedicated. And that is true. That's part of my job. But I think that that leaves out a huge part of what doula work actually is, which is like connection work. So essentially, my job is to be a safe person for my clients. And that means that I get to know them throughout pregnancy. We're texting, calling kind of as much as they want to text and call me. We meet in person multiple times. They know me and they feel comfortable with me by the time that I am at their birth. Then I am there for their whole labor. So I don't take a 12-hour shift. I don't only come when they're in active labor. I am there with them from when they need me to when they don't need me. And then after birth, I am also seeing them postpartum to help them navigate all of the things that come with that. And that's very different than medical staff because you're getting whoever's on call. You might be meeting them for the first time that day. Not only are they managing your medical care, but they are also strangers. They're people that you don't know. And so a huge part of being a doula is being that kind of consistent force throughout the pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And that's why I kind of challenge this idea that a lot of people have, that is, I don't need a doula if I have an epidural. And that is just not true. I honestly would say I work a lot harder with my clients who have epidurals than my clients who go unmedicated. When people are unmedicated, they are much more like intuitively moving their body around. There's already so much built into that experience that helps labor go how it goes. Whereas when you have an epidural, there's a lot more work that I am doing to get you into different positions, to help you manage any pain that does come up, to navigate when you even get the epidural. Whatever it is that we are navigating, with epidurals, there's a lot more. One thing that I always think is funny is that a lot of people think that I, as a doula, am kind of like arguing with medical staff or like advocating in this really harsh way to get people to have less medical intervention. And I would say for me, it's most often the opposite, actually. It's most often, challenging this idea that people shouldn't or can't get an epidural early in labor. I do a lot of advocacy with anesthesia. It's unfortunately quite common that people are not believed when they say that they are in pain when they have an epidural, which is a larger conversation because also people are just not educated well sometimes on what an epidural actually is like, and that you do still feel a lot. But I would say that my advocacy much more often is for more help from medical staff than it is less. So if you have an epidural, it doesn't mean that you won't need advocacy. If you have an epidural, it's actually really advantageous to have a doula because they should be moving you around into different positions, helping your labor go smoothly, helping you make decisions about all of these other things that can come up. And especially when you have an epidural, you have a little bit more brain power back, right? And so you can really make decisions and have these really in-depth discussions with your team, and doulas help facilitate a lot of that. Another thing that sometimes people worry about is that a doula might replace their partner or might make their partner feel that they are not important or they can't help or anything like that. And while that absolutely can happen, I would say that a huge part of my job as a doula is actually helping partners be involved and helping them understand where their place is, where they should be speaking up, where they should not be speaking up, perhaps. I had a dad once who we were pushing for maybe like an hour and a half, and he out loud said to me, "Something must be wrong, right? It's not supposed to take this long." After we had, talked in the prenatals about how pushing often takes like up to 3 or 4 hours with your first baby. And that's a moment where a correction from a nurse might feel really, really kind of harsh to people, but because I know them, I can kind of have that conversation in a nicer way. But also it's my place to be like, we're not talking about time right now. It doesn't matter. She's doing great. We don't need to talk about that. And so helping partners is a lot of my job, but also just making sure that partners feel secure and safe in the space as well, because it is, of course, the birth experience of the gestational parent. But it is also a huge life event and experience for partners, and oftentimes they get kind of like pushed to the wayside. And it can also be an extremely traumatic experience for them. And often partners go in feeling extremely helpless, and then that leads into the helplessness and the feelings of being kind of like left out of part of this parenthood experience that goes into postpartum and affects a lot of things negatively. A lot of my job is helping them be involved and also helping them understand how helpful their involvement is and in what ways they could be more helpful, or just letting them rest. Like, you're not going to be a really helpful parent postpartum if you stayed up and you were like right there the entire labor when we have a really long labor. If we have a really long labor, especially if someone has an epidural, but even if they don't, I'm often telling partners like, go sleep, because I am going home and I'm going to sleep for 12 hours after this thing's over, but the partners are not doing that. The partners are then having a baby that they are taking care of. And I want them to be rested so that they can be really, really helpful in these really big moments, and also so that they can be helpful postpartum. A lot of my job is honestly the logistics around birth and like making sure that every little thing is in order so that my client doesn't have to worry about it. I'm communicating to staff, hey, they want to see their placenta after it comes out. Let's just leave it in a bin in the corner of the room. Then they don't have to have that conversation. We can just see the placenta later. I can communicate to staff, hey, they're not okay with students, or like whatever it is. I can be kind of part of that communication and just help things run a bit smoother. That being said, as a doula, there's also advocacy involved in my work, and advocacy is a little bit of a touchy or complicated subject to a lot of people because a lot of people don't really like doulas. You will see the sentiment a lot of like, I like a doula when they are just doing hip squeezes, just doing essential oils, just doing these little like pain support things, but I don't like when they do anything else. And this is a common sentiment because, one, the reality is that there are some doulas who are trying to influence client decisions. There absolutely are. There are doulas who are maybe making environments unsafe, challenging staff in ways that are not appropriate. That being said, I think that it is a very, very complicated gray area because truthfully, our job is to advocate for what our clients want and also help them understand the risk benefit analysis that they are looking at, right? And different people are going to have different risk tolerances, and your risk tolerance might be different than that of your midwife or your OBGYN. And so because of that, it's my job, if there's a provider who does not want to intervene yet or doesn't want to do something and my client is like, no, I need this to happen, that's my job to also kind of help support them, help them gather more information and make them feel that there's someone on their side. And the same thing in the opposite direction. If there's a provider who, let's say, wants to break my client's water and my client is laboring fine, that's something that I can step up and ask more questions about why, so that my client understands the provider's point of view, but also something that I can give space. I can say, let's have a couple minutes to talk about this. I can say, it's always okay to say no. Sometimes people literally just need a reminder that it is okay to ask questions, that it is okay to say no to things, because in medical spaces, the reality is there is a power dynamic between providers and patients. And when we ignore that, it's just completely unhelpful. And that power dynamic often kind of creates this situation where a provider will say, okay, let's do this thing. And without understanding why it's happening, what is even going to happen, what potential side effects might be, what potential benefits might be, people just say yes. And they just say yes because they think this person is in charge, knows what they're doing, and I'm just going to say yes to it. And for some people, that's amazing. That's like a really safe feeling for them where they can absolutely just trust their team and say, you know what, I trust that these people know what's best for me and I'm absolutely going to do whatever they say. I absolutely have clients who feel that way, and that is amazing. That's kind of like the ideal scenario, right? But the reality is that there are a lot of people who don't feel that way, whether it's because of something that their provider has said or done in the past, whether it's just the fact that they have medical trauma, whether it's that they don't know this person who is here in charge of their care, whether it's that they want something that is not up to policy in their hospital, or added dynamics like the racial dynamic in the US, added dynamics of clients who are queer, clients who are fat, and all of the complexities that come with the oppression that the medical system has also perpetuated throughout time. So taking all of that, we just know that there will be some people who not distrust their providers inherently, but they question whether recommendations are what's best for them, or they just have a higher drive to actually understand why decisions are being made and want to have some autonomy in the process. And that is very, very, very controversial. Partially because sometimes people genuinely are listening to misinformation. I mean, I'm on TikTok. I know that there's misinformation out there, okay? I know that doulas are spreading misinformation. That is a very real thing and not a good thing. And we should be combating that. And I'm glad that there are providers that are combating that. However, there also are people who fully understand the risks and benefits of a situation and still don't agree with what their provider is saying or what their nurse is saying. For example, I had a client who was having an elective induction and the Pitocin was not Pitocining, okay? We were on Pitocin for a long time, nothing was happening, and the provider was like, okay, let's break your waters. And the benefit of that is that often when you break someone's waters and they're in labor and they have Pitocin going, it speeds things up and it makes things happen, and it's just like, oh, now there are powerful contractions that are going to bring our baby here. That's wonderful. But this was an elective induction. And my client knew, because we had talked about, and also because at this time I talked about it with the nurse, we talked about it with the provider, that another option is to turn Pitocin off and go home. And that is what my client decided to do. And it was not what the provider wanted to do. If your water is not broken and you are not progressing in labor and you are on Pitocin, and this is an induction that can wait a few days, you absolutely have the opportunity to wait a few days, even though for most people that will not be pitched by their providers. They might not even be told at all that that is an option. A benefit of having a doula is that we had already talked about this scenario before we were there. And in the moment when it was suggested to break waters, I was there to kind of be like, what are the other options that we have? And just remind everybody of the fact that there's not just one road ahead. There's all of these different choices that you can make, and it is up to you what choices happen when. But even if that is as far as my advocacy is going, right, there absolutely are still providers who do not like doulas, and they do not like that anyone is doing what they do not want them to do. And a lot of the times that's out of genuine concern. Doctors have traumas and they see these bad outcomes all the time, and it's not that they are bad people trying to like force you into something to make money, right? But when you are constantly traumatized and not given time off, of course you are going to have biases when it comes to how safe something is. For example, a lot of providers don't do VBACs, but then there are also a lot of providers who love VBACs. And the difference between those two might be having witnessed some really bad outcomes. It might be that one works with a higher risk population. It might be just things about the hospital. Two providers are often going to have two different opinions on what you should do in a specific situation. And because of that dynamic, a lot of people want to be making those decisions themselves and just have more information so that they can do that. Just like there are some providers that are awful and manipulative, the same goes for doulas, and we can't ignore that fact. And doulas, just like doctors, just like midwives or nurses, are also coming from our own traumas, whether that's our own personal birth trauma, whether that's the trauma of watching our clients go through X, Y, and Z thing. And it's important for us all to be mindful of that dynamic and try and approach these conversations with a lot of empathy for the other people in the situation so that we can actually come to an understanding and clients can really get information before they are forced into making some extreme decision. As medical providers in any field, but especially in obstetrics, given the history, given that birth is different than any other medical event happening in a hospital, you have to respect that someone can know all of the information and have all of the data and still choose something different than you would. You have to accept that some people are just less risk averse than you, and they can know all the downsides and they still might want to do that thing. Going against some sort of medical advice is challenging someone who is in power, and that reaction often is going to be bad. So some people don't like doulas because of stereotypes, but some people don't like doulas because they have had personal experiences that absolutely were negative. Doulas should be a part of helping healthcare function better and advocating for people to get the best care. And Unfortunately, like in every career, there are people who are misinformed. There are people who have bad intentions. The job of doula is not exempt from that. Another question that I get often, especially on TikTok, is why are doulas so expensive? Why are you paying so much for just like a support person or someone who hip squeezes or whatever? And there are 3 reasons that doulas are really, really expensive, okay? Number 1 is that doulas all offer very different things. So someone who is offering like a Zoom prenatal, being there for your birth and doing hands-on skills and then checking in with you postpartum once, that is going to be a different price point of doula than somebody who is like really doing the work to get to know you, is doing hours and hours of care prenatally, is going to be there for you however long you need at the birth, also is doing hours and hours of postpartum care. And then on top of that, some doulas are providing photography, some doulas are providing birth processing, some kind of like placenta art or encapsulation or whatever it is. We all offer very, very different things. And so you're not just paying for the doula to be there during your birth. That is not just what you're paying for. You are paying for all of the other things that they are offering in their specific package. The second thing is that doulas can only take so many people per month. And part of what you're paying for is how few clients that person takes per month. So somebody who is taking 6 clients a month has a higher risk of not making it to your birth, of there being overlap, right? But they might be able to charge less because they take that many births, and so they're having more income, which means they charge less individually, but they might still be making the same amount per month. Whereas someone who takes 1 birth per month, almost 100% is going to be able to make it to your birth, right? But they have to pay all of their bills with that 1 paycheck from that birth. And then the third thing that I want to bring up is that you are paying for the sacrifices that that doula is making in their life. Right now, as we record, my partner is on a family vacation and I am not able to be there. And I'm not able to be there because this trip was not planned enough in advance and I had already booked clients for this month. And if I had taken off even a week, it would have jeopardized my ability to be there for my clients, which means that I would have missed out on that income, which means that the trip itself would not have just been the cost of the trip. I don't have PTO. So I'm also taking off at least 2 or 3 clients off of what I can take, which is thousands and thousands of dollars. In addition to big things like that, like trips, I also can't go skiing or like hiking for hours and not have service because my clients have to be able to reach me. I can't go out on a weeknight and get drunk or get high because, let's be real, someone could call me and I need to be able to drive to their birth. There are so many lifestyle sacrifices that you make when you become a birth doula, and I think that that's part of it that a lot of people aren't thinking about, is that you're not just paying for like the hours that your doula is there, which by the way might be like 40 hours in a row. What other job are you on a random day at 2 p.m. going to get a call and then have to work for 40 hours, right? But even besides the like actual hours that we are with you, we are giving up so much in our life to be able to do this job that a lot of us will want to be able to save some money from our job. A lot of us will want to be able to be, making more than just enough to pay our bills because we are giving up so much of that lifestyle. So you charge more so that you can take some amount of time off. And I know I said 3, but I'm coming up with a 4th reason. So the 4th reason is also because a lot of us take on sliding scale or pro bono clients. I personally took on 5 free births, completely free, last year. The only reason that I was able to do that, the only reason that I can ever take a client on for less than like the amount of my full package, is because I have other clients who are willing to pay that full price. If I didn't charge that much, I would never be able to take on somebody who really, really cannot afford my services. And I really want to be able to do that. And a lot of doulas find it to be very, very important to them that they take on the people that really need a doula. They really need an advocate. Sometimes people cannot afford a doula, and not just like they don't really want to spend a couple $1,000s on it, but they like actually do not have the money to pay for one. And to be able to provide services for those people, I have to also have clients who are willing to pay top price. Okay, that is it for the FAQ about doulas specifically. So now I'm going to answer some questions that I get really, really often just from the general public, but especially on social media about birth, pregnancy, postpartum, children. I'm going to give you the short answer, and then I'm going to give you the long answer. The first question is, how do I naturally induce my labor? The short answer is, you can't. And I'm going to say that again because I feel like some of y'all need to hear it. The short answer is, you can't. The long answer is, there isn't really anything natural that you can do to induce your labor. So like the Miles circuit doesn't induce labor. Red raspberry leaf tea, dates, all that stuff doesn't induce labor. But that doesn't mean that those things aren't useful. Those are labor prep techniques. So they might help labor go smoother when it happens. And those are important things to know and to do. Just don't expect them to send you into labor the next day. The long answer is that there are some interventions that people find to be more natural or see as more natural than like a medication, right? So number one, membrane sweeps. Not necessarily natural as in something that your body's already doing, but it's not a medication, right? Foley balloons, also similar thing. It's a mechanical tool, and while it's not necessarily natural, it's also not a medication, which is what a lot of people are referring to when they say natural, right? I mean, you wouldn't naturally be eating 6 dates a day probably, but here we are. There's also castor oil, which is not technically a medication in the way that like Pitocin is, right? That being said, it is absolutely still an intervention, and I would probably consider it a medication from in like a colloquial sense, where it's something that you are ingesting that has an effect, and it comes with risks and benefits just like Pitocin does. So that's the long answer. Question number 2, what should I eat or drink to increase my milk supply? Short answer is nothing. But the long answer is that there are some supplements, foods, whatever, that are galactagogues. So they are things that theoretically could increase your prolactin, give you a better milk supply. But I would say that that kind of support is more of like support for your milk supply or support for the things that you're already doing. Mostly milk supply is supply and demand. So if you are demanding enough, your milk supply will catch up. That's why when you talk to lactation consultants, they'll often recommend feeding more often, pumping, helping babies latch, all of these things that increase the demand to your body to make milk, which is then what triggers your body to make more milk. And the reality is, eating oats is not going to make you go from pumping 1 ounce to 5 ounces, but adding in a couple extra pump sessions or feeding sessions just might. Question number 3 is, how do I ensure that I have a fast and smooth labor? The short answer is, you can't. You can't guarantee that. You can't make the odds extremely high that that happens. The long answer is that there are labor prep things that you can do to kind of help your body. You can do pelvic floor therapy. You can do whether it's like prenatal yoga, whether it's stretching every day, walking every day. There are things that you can do to help support your body through this experience. And you can take childbirth education classes. You can take a hypnobirthing course. There are things you can do to support your mind through this process. But you can set yourself up in every single way to do amazing, and your body still might make other decisions. And the real game of labor prep isn't to guarantee how your labor goes, so how long it is. It's not to guarantee how long you push for or if you tear or whatever. That is not the game of labor prep. It's not to dictate an outcome. The game of labor prep is giving your body and your brain the best chance to have a good experience. So absolutely do all the labor prep things, okay? Absolutely do them. And hopefully they help your body do what it needs to do when it's time. But also know that the real benefit of all of this prep is helping you cope with unpredictable, difficult things. And labor prep should do that whether you have a cesarean or an uncomplicated, unmedicated vaginal birth, right? Let's take hypnobirthing, for example. A lot of people think that hypnobirthing is just for giving birth without an epidural. But hypnobirthing is actually a huge tool if you end up having an unexpected cesarean, because all that hypnobirthing is about is tricking your mind into positive framing and being able to cope with things that just are difficult. And yes, contractions and unmedicated labor is difficult, but so are cesareans. So is an epidural placement. So is a really hard, long labor that is not going or progressing in the way that you expected it to. That is the key with labor prep, is being able to take on those situations and know how to cope with it, not guaranteeing outcomes of certain situations. The last question is one that I get often from people who are not yet pregnant or people that I meet kind of like out around in the world. People will often say, is it really that bad giving birth? Like, is it really that bad? Are people kind of making a big deal out of it? Is it really that bad? And the short answer to that is yes. But the long answer is that it's actually the framing of that question that is the problem, right? Is birth that intense? Absolutely. Are people exaggerating how painful it is? No. That is their experience, and that is absolutely true. But I think that a lot of people who are asking that question are asking it because they see clips from movies and things where people are screaming and yelling, and it's like the worst thing in the world is happening so suddenly. For most people, it is not that bad. So birth trauma happens. Birth can be a horrible, horrible thing, and people can really hate their birth experience. They can really grieve the experience of the birth that they did not get. And all of that is completely valid. It can absolutely be that bad. But for a lot of people, while it is the most intense experience, maybe even the most painful experience of their entire life, they still love their experience. And I think that duality is what is really, really hard for people to wrap their mind around if they don't work in the birth space, is that people can be in a ton of pain. People can be, even in the moment, begging for it to stop, begging for a way out, and then they can come out of that experience and be like, I loved my birth. My birth was amazing. I had a great time. I actually, as a doula, see that happen all the time, where I'll have a client who goes unmedicated, and in the moment, they're like, why did I do this? I hate this. And then right after delivery, they're like, that was awesome. I'm so proud of myself. That was so cool. And I think that it's just important that we know that both of those things can be true at the same time. It can be really hard and in some ways awful and painful, and really cool and transformative and empowering. And then the other part of that is that when we're seeing birth happen in movies and TV shows and all of that, you are not seeing a depiction really of birth, how it actually is, how it actually goes for most people, especially because in the US, most people have epidurals. And when you see videos of people pushing in TV shows and they're like, I can't do it, they're, yelling with every contraction, even though they're like on their back having a hospital birth, it's always, to me at least, a little bit confusing what the show is trying to depict, because when you have an epidural, theoretically, you should not be having to like vocalize through your contractions. Even while pushing, it can be really, really intense, and maybe right at the end, you're kind of like, ugh. But for most people, it's difficult, but it's not hugely painful when you have an epidural. And when you don't have an epidural, you're usually not on your back. You're usually not like yelling and talking. You're just like groaning, grunting. And so I think that there's also just like a misconception about what birth actually looks like, sounds like, all of that. So is it that bad? Sure, it totally can be, but it's also not bad in the way that people think that it is. And lastly, I want to leave you with the story of the first birth that I ever attended as a doula. Starting out as a doula is really hard. And if you are a newer doula listening to this, you know what I'm talking about. It's just hard to get your first couple births. But I started being a doula during COVID, and there was a new doula in my area who got COVID, and she had a client who was 41 weeks pregnant, and I ended up being the doula that client chose to have. So I was a backup. I had not met this person in person before I was at her labor, and I remember being scared shitless. Like on my drive over, I remember being like literally hyperventilating, my chest pounding, like everything in my body was like, what the hell am I doing? What if something goes wrong? What if I do a bad job? What if they hate me? Whatever. All of that was going through my mind. I was just so deeply in this space of like, holy shit, what did I sign up for? And then I got to the birth and I came inside, and my client, her water had just broken, and she was on all fours, kneeling and just going through a contraction. And when she looked up after her contraction was over, I said, "Hi, I'm Jo. It's nice to meet you in person." And the first thing I did was just ask her if she wanted some pressure on her back. And she said yes. And I immediately broke that touch barrier. And truly, that was the moment where I was like, I need to do this always. Because immediately I felt completely calm. I felt like I knew exactly what to do. The back pressure was helpful to her. And I just had this deep sense of like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I am not a very religious or spiritual person in any way, but birth is the one thing that I am like, this is another world. You're like so in another realm in the birth space. And I felt that so deeply in that birth. We decided it was a birth center birth, and we labored there for a bit. I got on the phone with the midwives. I was like, we're heading over. Water's broken. Liquid's clear. Let's go. And then again, I was back in my car being like, oh my God. Oh my God, I'm going to a birth. It's happening. Holy shit. Am I going to get there in time? Like, she's, clearly in active labor, second baby. We got in the birth center. She got in the tub. I remember just feeling so deeply honored that this person was comfortable with me there, that, that there was any sense of comfort in me holding her hand when she was pushing. We were doing tug of war, so like pulling on a blanket together to get this baby out. I was holding a mirror for her so she could see her baby's head. It's gonna make me cry. Talking about it is gonna make me cry, but it just really was like the most life-changing experience I have ever had. And I just knew from that moment, from that like experience on, that this was something that I just needed to do. Like, it was just so deep within me that this was what I should be doing. I should be doing all the time. And that this was something that like I could do, that I could be good at. And I also remember that when this baby was born, they didn't like transition to crying super fast. And I remember being so impressed with how calm the midwives were, but how quickly they acted. And baby, within a minute was crying and pink and great. But it was my first birth, and to me, I was like, oh, is this a problem? Is it not? And now looking back on it, that I know more, I'm like, yeah, that baby did not come out looking so great. But at the time, I couldn't even quite pick up on if there was a problem or not, because of how calm and how fast the midwives were. And I remember being so impressed by that. And I remember sitting in the corner while they had golden hour and helping with that first latch. I remember the partner talking to their baby about being excited to show them the trees and the sky. And I'm going to try and do this without crying. And it was like truly the most beautiful, amazing, like human animal thing I had ever been witness to. And not only was it just like valuable and life-changing, but it also made me like deeply, deeply sad that we are so not exposed to birth. It made me so sad that I had grown up not knowing what birth could be like, what bringing a baby into this world can be, how valuable and important and deep that experience can be. And it was very quick. I was there for maybe like 5 hours. But it was so beautiful to me. And I remember just getting in my car after and like calling my doula mentor and being like, holy shit, I just did that. Even though genuinely, like, I didn't do shit. I I did some hip squeezes and back pressure. And I know that I was helpful to my client and all of that. But like now as a doula looking back, I'm like, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. There's so many other things that I probably could have tried or done or said. But it was what it needed to be in the moment. And I left feeling like so wired, like exhausted, but feeling so grateful for the experience and just like excited. I was just like, I got to do this again. It was amazing. And now that I've attended so many more births than that, I still think that was such a beautiful, beautiful birth. And I have seen that same like amazing deep, like empowering journey happen with births like that are like fast out of hospital, births that are really long and difficult and taxing, births with a planned early epidural, elective inductions, planned C-sections, unplanned C-sections. I've seen that kind of like deep, empowering, beautiful experience with all different kinds of birth. And being a doula is just such a privilege. It is such an honor. And I hope that by talking about birth, by talking about, my experiences, that people can be let in on a little piece of humanity that we often don't get to witness. So I hope that you all enjoyed this episode. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you had a good time. And I hope to see you next week when Caitlyn is back. We'll get to some, fewer tears, more laughing perhaps. And we'll be having a bit more fun. Anyway, thank you for being here, and I hope you all have a good weekend.